Hello again. So today we're going to be tackling a activity scheduling problem using an activity scheduling method called a PERT chart, and we're going to be finding the critical path. This is typically used in classes or sometimes in industry to plan activities in order for everything to be started and done at an efficient and correct time. So let's get started. We're asked to consider the project described in a diagram or in a table. There's a first column which gives us the activity name, assess customers' needs, write and submit proposal, obtain approval, etc. Each of the activities is given a designation, A through G. Then the third column gives us the predecessor to each activity, so the prerequisite for each activity to start. For example, A doesn't have one, but B requires for A to be done in order for it to start. The last rightmost column gives us the time. In this case, the time is given in weeks. A takes 2 weeks, B takes 1 week, D takes 2 weeks, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to describe to you the information that we're going to be putting down. It's going to be a series of nodes. Each node represents an activity, and they're going to be connected by arrows in a sequential order. One node is going to be like this with the name of the node, the name of the activity, right? This is going to be a letter A, B, C, D corresponding to each activity. And at the bottom, we're going to have the duration in weeks. So the activity that makes most sense to start with is the one that has no predecessors. So in this case, that is activity A. So let's go ahead and draw our node for activity A. And activity A takes 2 weeks to complete. So the first activity that requires A to be done in order for it to start is B. And that's the only one. So our next node is going to be B, and B requires 1 week to complete. Next we have C, which requires B to be done. So activity C requires B to be done in order for it to start. And C takes 1 week to complete. Now here's where things get a little bit more complicated, but not too bad. We have that activities D and E both require activity C to be done, which is why, since there are two activities dependent upon this activity being done, we have to have two equally sequenced nodes parting from C. We're going to branch this out into two. And we're going to have one node for D and one node for E. Now, activity D takes 2 weeks to complete, and activity E takes 5 weeks to complete. Now, activity F requires that both activity D and activity E be completely finished in order for it to start, which now we're going to do the reverse of what we did with C to D and E, and we're going to merge them back together. Here's our node for activity F. And that takes 5 weeks to complete. And finally, we have activity G, the last activity in our system. And that only requires for activity F to be done. So activity G, and activity G takes 1 week to be done. Now, what we need to do here is find the critical path. The critical path is going to be, once again, to reiterate, is going to be the path that we should take to ensure that all activities have all of their prerequisites done before they get started, right? So, for example, in the case of activity C, we'd have to have finished activity B. In the case of activity F, we'd have to have finished both activity D and activity E, but the path can only have a single a trajectory through intersections. So starting with A, our critical path is very simple because they're just single sequential activities. We go to B, we go to C, and at this intersection we have to make a decision. Do we go and ensure that activity D gets done, or do we go and ensure that activity E gets done? You could feel free to pause and try to solve this on your own, but if not, I'll give you the answer, obviously. So let's say that we go with activity D. So we make sure that activity D gets done. If activity D gets done, that takes 2 weeks to complete, and then we finish activity D in 2 weeks, and then we start activity F. We're not guaranteeing that within those 2 weeks, activity E also got finished, because activity E could take up to 5 weeks. So this is why we go with the longer duration of activity, which in this case it's E, because within those 5 weeks we have plenty of time to finish activity D as well, which is only 2 weeks. So our critical path goes through here. Obviously then it goes to the only next activity on the schedule, which is activity F, and it finishes with activity G. So in orange there, that is our critical path.